All right, all. Today is another just kind of lab time for you guys to work on your project, work on finishing up the labs that are due this week, and to work on the project. So you guys have the ice cream lab that is due this coming Friday, the 4th. You have the yoga lab. This one's about CSS transitions and animations. This one's about CSS functions and variables. You guys also have, it's not due this week, but you guys should be finishing up this make a responsive web page lab. This is to kind of give you guys practice for how to build from scratch a web page and then, using, um, oops, I think I'm in the wrong section here. Sorry, I was showing you one from a previous semester. Let's do this, due next week, next Monday. This lab is kind of meant to just give you guys practice with doing responsiveness. You can use this as kind of like a guide or a reference point when you guys work on your final project. So if you've not finished these three, make sure you guys complete that. You guys also have your style tile and mockup due. Okay. So remember that a style tile is a visual representation of, or it lays out the visual elements of a project. So it's separated from the layout. The idea is that, when you have a major website, it's like, you could separate the text or an image and put it on any page. So rather than worrying about the exact location of it, it's like, okay, where would we, how in general would the text look like? Um, you know, so the idea is like, the point of this document is like, imagine if, imagine if someone new, imagine you worked in like a group project and then someone got added to your group and you wanted to make sure that that person was kind of like up to speed with, the necessary information about like what's going on in this site visually, what do pages look like, what does the fonts look like, what does text look like, what are the kind of colors and general visual vibes that we're going for. This is kind of like what this document would be about. As I mentioned previously many times, a style tile is kind of like the way an interior decorator would have like swatches for like wallpaper or like carpet or when you go to paint a room you have like swatches of paint, right? Because you're not going to paint the whole thing and then look at it. The idea is just to have a kind of like a small sample of it. And that's kind of the idea here. So it's like these are just kind of showing like, hey, this is what a headline in general would look like, regardless of what the headline is. This is what a subheading would look like. These are, possible colors. This is the kind of main fonts we might be using, like Roboto. These are like, adjectives that would be used in the project, or not in the project, but used to describe, the visual idea of what's going on here. I give you guys kind of a template, but you should really kind of build your own that kind of works for what you're going for. You know what I mean? And then finally, you have your mock-up. We've talked about mock-ups ad nauseum at this point. I'm assuming you guys know what a mock-up is, but a mock-up is like a visual representation of the project, but not coded. So in other words, like, in theory, this is what the web page should look like when it's done using code, like HTML, CSS in this case, but you didn't actually code anything. And so people will use, prototype software, Photoshop, Illustrator, Figma, whatever, whatever the cool new software is to do that. And then it's like you're setting up the colors, you're showing the layout. It's like single column, one, two, three, four, five columns, icons. These are the fonts, blah, 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 blah. And then the idea is that you're going to show this to your group or your stakeholders, like a manager or, uh, your boss, your direct project manager, maybe the stakeholder, the client, possibly, maybe all of these people meet together in like a Zoom call, probably. You're going to share this, and it's like, the client's going to go, I like this, but, let's think about X, Y, and Z. So, okay, here's this, but maybe we have three columns, so the images are larger. Maybe these text is a little too big, so we make the hyperlinks a little smaller. Maybe instead of highlighting, maybe instead of a hover effect being yellow, it's, I don't know, um, pink or something, like pink or something like that. Whatever it is, you can kind of work out those details before you start coding. Okay. Um, Even though for the wireframes, you guys did the desktop size, the tablet and the smartphone, I'm not going to require that you do all three of those for the mockup. You can just do one. So you could just do the desktop, or you could just do the tablet if you want, or just do the smartphone if you want to do that. Okay. For these, you can use any projects, or sorry, any software you want. There's really no, I'm not going to limit you. So if you want to use Photoshop or Illustrator or Figma or whatever you want to do, that's perfectly fine. All right, assuming you've done that, let's say you've completed these because you know, were a busy bee and got your stuff done, then really you should be working on your final project. You guys know that you're working on a fictitious business. So you guys are, taking a business website. You're designing a business website that's going to be responsive, meaning it's going to work for large devices like a desktop, medium devices like a tablet, and small devices like a smartphone. You guys are doing pre-production, or you have done pre-production to help you with this. So this is part of your grade. You worked on a wireframe. In theory, you're going to have your style tile and your mock-up done by this point. Um, for this project, things I grade upon are the design. This is a design course, so hopefully something that's visually interesting to the audience. Proper HTML, CSS, so making sure that your HTML syntax is correct. You guys have had lots of practice with that at this point. Same with CSS syntax. You should be aware of how to apply proper syntax, things like classes, IDs, if you want to. Things should be functional, meaning your images should load correctly, your hyperlinks should work correctly if there are any. This is understanding of like file management and things like that. I would say having your breakpoints work correctly is a part of that functionalness. Your website should be, responsive, meaning if I resize my browser, it should work so that the design does not quote unquote fall apart. This means using rems for responsive type, having media queries, making sure that your images are responsive and they can scale if necessary. And then finally, you're going to host this just like you guys did for your first two projects. You can use your Infinity Free or your GitHub or whatever it is that you want to use. Um, so when you submit this, you're going to, as per usual, you're going to give me a root folder. The root folder contains all of the necessary files that I would need. That includes like the HTML file, CSS files, if there's multiple, any images that I need, audio, video, if there are any, that kind of stuff. Like with other projects, so let's say that, am I on the right one? I might be on the wrong page here. Let's say you upload your website. Let's pretend this is your final project. I want the URL, so take the URL, copy it, go to like, TextEdit or Microsoft Word or something like that. Paste the URL and put that into your root folder so I have access to it so that I can see if it's live. This is also how you guys are going to share your website with other people. The other thing I want you guys to do is have a really simple presentation. So this is kind of like it's kind of like it shows all the stuff you've done. So it shows your pre-production material, has like a cover, and then a link to your website. So let's think of this as like a presentation, like if you were going to present this to like a client or a boss or something like that. So I just want to show you kind of an example here. So it's like here is one from last semester or last time I taught this. So it's like you got a cover page. It has like the elements that we've been working on. Like this is the style tile for the this is her wireframes. This is like her mock-up. And then this is a link that goes to the final project. So it's a nice, simple presentation, right? Now, let's say you're new, you've never done, let's say, you're not used to building a multi-page PDF. How can you do that? I'll show you guys how you can do that really easily. It's not too difficult. To make this multi-page project, there's a lot of ways you could do it. If you know how to use InDesign, because you've taken design classes here or somewhere else, you're welcome to use InDesign. Those of you who've not done that, I'm going to show you a really easy way to do this. There's a link in today's, I've showed you guys before, and it's a website, it's a free website called combinepdf.com. And what it does is it just combines multiple pages into a multi-page PDF. Uh, don't use this thing. They try to trick you here. But what I'm going to do is like, let's say I have let's say this is your files. This person is like, this is their wireframes and, their style tile and such. Let's say I wanted to combine these into one single PDF. What I could do is I'm going to hit upload, which is right there. Make sure it says combine. And then I'm just going to grab any file that I want to do. Now, all of these are PDFs, but you could also use like images and such. And you can then actually reorder these. So maybe I kind of want, well, I kind of like this, but let's just for the sake of argument, I want this. So I want it to be website. I think this is supposed to be his, that's desktop. This is tablet. And then mobile, style tile, and then so you can reorder these, and then I don't, so I don't have a cover here, but you can make a cover really quickly in like Photoshop, Photopea, Figma, and then maybe another document that contains your link. And then I'm going to hit combine, and that's pretty much it. And then it literally downloads it as a multi-page PDF. It's going to call it something like combine PDF.pdf. So you can see this actually has multiple pages here. But then you could just rename it to yourself, last name, first name, you know, project, something like that. Okay. So this is how you could easily make a simple multi-page presentation of all in theory, you have all this stuff, you have all the pre-production, and you just throw on a cover and a link to your final project. And it makes a nice little presentation that looks good where you're going to present it to your boss or to your stakeholder or something like that. Okay. So all of this is due. Where is assignment 3? This is all due the 16th. So today is the 2nd. So this is in 2 weeks. Okay. You're seeing this before 9 a.m. Today's class is really just lab time to work on all this stuff. Guess what? Next week is also just lab time to work on all this stuff. And then you'll present your final project on the 16th. Okay. Look forward. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Oops. At David Hurwich at SF. Didn't mean to. sfsu.edu. Okay.